Everybody, it's Lisa from Been There Got Out. It's been a while. Sorry we were on vacation and then our other interviewees got sick. And so today's guest is another Instagram live version. We didn't even have time to do a tech test. So I'm hoping that she can figure out how to get on. I just talked to her, so it'll be her first Instagram live. There she is. Okay, so Annie, I see you. Whoops. I see you, and I am going to try to get you in here. Whoops, sorry. Let's try it. Very excited. And okay, I think this is gonna work. All right, Annie, I just invited you, so just accept my invite and let's get you on here.
Yahoo!
Awesome!
I'm so excited.
I know, it worked. So everybody, this is Annie Alexander. We just met recently. We wanted her back on last month, but she got sick. And so even though I got back really late last night from Costa Rica, I was like, she's still coming on. We've been waiting too long for her. So Annie is a hypnotherapist in Washington State, among other things. And when we first met through this networking group that has nothing to do with Instagram, I was like, she is the perfect person, because not only does she deal with healing and trauma, but she really, really understands legal abuse, and that's hard to find in the professional world outside of family court. So Annie, why don't you just briefly introduce yourself and say a little bit about what you do, and then I'll start hammering you with all those questions that we came up with during our first conversation.
Yay, can't wait. Okay, I am Annie Alexander. I am a board-certified hypnotherapist, and I work mainly with trauma. My clients are both men and women, and I've been doing this for at least 5 years, but I have been a practicing psychotherapist for many decades previously, so I know the whole mental health domain and how that works. So I have a lot to bring to the table besides just hypnotherapy and, oh, by the way, did you want to lose weight or quit smoking? So I like to go for the gusto, so to speak. Hammer away. That's what you need to know about me.
Okay, so at the beginning of our conversation, when I told you what I did, I said that our clients are dealing with severe trauma, and it's not in the past. It's not something that they can get over. It's something that they're still actively addressing, since many of them are still in the family court system. And you said that this system is really stacked against certain people. Can you first start with that, and then I'll keep going?
Okay. Most of the clients whom I've dealt with, both as a therapist and now as a hypnotherapist, have found that the court systems oftentimes assign guardians, assign supervisors, assign people who I know are supposed to present as very neutrally oriented, but in fact, it doesn't appear to be that way when they relate those stories to me. It sounds very stacked according to I'm going to call it patriarchal system, which assumes that the male in the picture has equal rights despite the fact that he, and I'm saying that he, it's not always the he, but he, for example, in this case, has been the abuser in many ways, whether that's physical, sexual, psychological, or a combination of all three. Thus, it assumes that there is a problem with the female or the mom, the custodial parent, as they're going back and forth about trying to figure out who's going to have custody of the kids, is there going to be shared custody, is there going to be visitation, and so forth. And so there's a tremendous amount of stress, A, because of the divorce, B, because trauma's been triggered, C, because moms are trying to protect their children, and D, because of all the ongoing but somewhat unseen, except to the custodial parent, the woman, unseen abuses that are propagated by a patriarchal court system.
Yeah, and so you had said that part of your job is to validate a person's experience. So how do you do that while at the same time helping a person de-stress?
I just have to let them know that I understand that there is a system in place and it's not very fair. And it's pre-weighted, if you will, meaning it's set up to not ensure that that everything is equilateral, but that you're kind of guilty because you got into this situation and now you're dragging your kids into it. And that's the inference. Whether or not anybody would acknowledge that, it's a basis of operation, so it's at least, at the very least, an energetic inference. So I want to spell that out for my clients so that we have a basis for which to move forward through partnership or building trust. And then we go from there into whatever modality is going to work best for them.
But how can you help someone who is still actively in the system and they can't control the system?
Because there are ongoing triggers. And when I work with somebody, usually in a series of 5, maybe 6, 7 sessions, we're creating a foundation for them to be able to manage their life. So not only is it going to positively influence the trauma that is ongoing for them through the court system or anything associated with that, but it's also going to address traumas that occurred prior to this marriage or relationship that are generating or fueling the additional emotional response. So that's how I do it, by clearing out the clutter that came before this to make this current situation much more manageable so that somebody has clarity and confidence in dealing with whatever's being thrown at them left and right.
Can you give an example of, say, a piece of clutter from someone's past that is triggering them more now that they're stuck in this kind of system?
Sure. I had a client who had a pretty good childhood, you know, nothing flaming, nothing that really came to mind, but we did our work because she was in the throes of this trauma through the court situation. And what came up was the fact that the messaging from her parents, and particularly her dad, inferred very directly that there was something wrong with her. She was somehow less than. And these are very universal or ubiquitous kinds of things that happen to all of us. Oh, you're not, oh, maybe I'm not quite good enough. Oh, what do I have to do? Love is conditional. Oh, maybe I have to be nice. All these kinds of messages, particularly from patriarchy to matriarchy. And when we clear that out, people can address the court situation and go, hey, sorry, I got a text that interfered, covered the screen, and caught my eye, and I was like, okay, I had to read that text, and I'm back with you. Okay. So we cleared, you never know, technology, so we cleared that out. And when it came time for her next interaction with her attorney, she said to me, you know, I could see how my attorney is well-meaning, but relatively unconscious. And so rather than feeling like she was victimized yet again by her attorney, whom she's paying big bucks for, she was like, yeah, this person doing the best they can, but just not operating on all cylinders. And she could see that post-hypnotherapeutically, whereas she could not see that previously, and she just continued to feel victimized.
Yeah, I mean, and what you just mentioned about someone feeling, I'll say, hurt and victimized by their own attorney, we see that a lot. And one of the things that we want to help our clients with is what we call taking strategic oversight of their case, and realizing that just because they have an attorney doesn't mean that that attorney is going to save their life, that they still have to take responsibility for certain things and be able to think as clearly as possible about how whatever decisions are made affect their lives, and be able to help their attorney build the case and strategize properly as well, instead of being like a passive recipient of like, okay, you put my narrative out there for me, and I'll just hope for the best. But that's not really how it works, or it shouldn't work that way.
It does. It should, but it doesn't. And so there is a tremendous expectation set, I think, that we all have when we go to a helping professional. They're just going to fix this for me. And that includes people that come to me. Well, Annie, will I just go to sleep and wake up differently as somebody who doesn't have these compulsive thoughts? And the answer is no. We're going to partnership together. So I would say that the word self-advocacy is 24/7. It's ongoing. And that can be really exhausting. However, if you set your expectations to know that I'm going to have to not only advocate for my child or children, but I'm going to advocate for myself at every turn, and my attorney is not the knight on the white horse. And so confronting yourself with that expectation is super important, but with my help, we can get those expectations in hand and in order very quickly to help you move forward into a process of empowerment and strength.
Yeah, Absolutely. And Annie, what you said, that's exactly what I was like, she's perfect to interview because that aligns so much with what we do and what we want for everyone. So one of the things that you also mentioned is how you can help people eliminate triggers. And one of the triggers that many people have to deal with is being gaslit, to doubting they doubt their own judgment because of the system that they're stuck in. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yep, gaslighting is an undermining process, and it's all part of the sabotage. It's part of the toolkit that narcissists and other individuals going through the court, the adversary is going to use, because they'll use anything at their disposal to get what they want. And not only is that a challenging situation, but it's an amplification. What I mean by that is we live in a patriarchal system where that exists, period. Day to day. So when we're not stressed, when we're not terribly traumatized, we're having to navigate that anyway. Now, when you add in a significant court battle, I put that in quotes, then you have the gaslighting, which is exponentially enhanced, and it's going to flatten people. You're going to have to pull yourself up from pancake position and realize, oh, this is part of the strategy to label these things. And while I'm not a huge fan of labeling, because I think it compartmentalizes too many things, I think it's very useful to label exactly what is going on, because that's all part of the validation process, which brings new life into the person who's advocating for herself and her children and making her feel like, okay, I do know what's going on. Now, what do I want to do about that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, one of the things we also talked about was the discovery process, and we know that people abuse the discovery process. You said people can be traumatized by documentation. Like, what does that look like?
Say a little bit more. Pull that thread through for me so that I have a better way to answer.
Okay, I know, because it's been a while. So I think we talk about one of the terms for legal abuse is paper abuse, where people are constantly asking you to produce all these records, and so that itself is like really, really scary. So you know, going through like piles and piles of paper all the time. You said something in the past about how it lasers the soul. Do you remember that? If I'm reading my hand.
I don't, but I agree.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah, I was gonna say, let's see. Every time you're looking at certain things, depending on the severity of that experience, you're recalling what you've been through and how that can be re-traumatizing as well. Like going through documentation, I know in my own situation, my lawyer was saying you need to look at certain things because it might help you with the case. And the therapist I had at the time was very concerned that just me digging through this paperwork was going to really upset me and make it harder to get through the entire divorce. Luckily, it was okay, because at that point, I think I was emotionally detached enough. But for a lot of people who are not emotionally detached yet, to have to look through the paper and relive like journaling experiences, it can make things so much worse.
It absolutely can, and that's very simply called a trigger. So it's one of the things that you have to do to build your case. And it's important to not be thinking about, oh, what does this piece of paper mean? Oh, I hope it's going to be sufficient. Oh, I hope it's going to prove the point. Oh, I hope it's going to help me articulate my strategy. And so if the individual going through the documentation can somewhat suspend their own judgments about the outcome of that documentation, that will help, I don't think it will stop, but it will help pad the stream, the ongoing stream of negative thoughts or judgments about that documentation. I know I had to go through something myself this past fall, very similar to that. And I was just putting some folders away, and I saw the name of the folder. I literally lost my breath, and I grabbed my chest, and I was like, oh, am I finished with that? And so my whole body started tingling, just as it is now. So the body has a complete physiological reaction to that. It's okay to stop and say, crap, I'm having this physiological reaction, and put the paperwork down just take a breath and breathe for a moment and recognize what's going on so that you can continue. And I have one more follow-up to that. And that is, if you need somebody to hold your hand while you go through the documentation, I think that's an excellent idea. And if they can't be there with you, maybe they can be there on the phone or a Zoom or something. And so you've got a voice beside your own. So you're saying, oh, I'm going through this, 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 and this. And the other person on the other end's going, okay, we'll put that in this pile. Okay, well, where do you want to store that? And that helps desensitize the immediacy of the trigger.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're thinking of, we just were talking with someone this morning who is years post-divorce and still is terrorized by the communications, by having to open up things and hear things like, you need to do this today, I need this from you, this is what's going to happen if you don't. And she's getting all upset and freaking out, and it's almost like we are part of that hand-holding by reminding her, this is the truth. Like, this is what this person does to you every single time. This is what the order says. They're not allowed to do that. So, you know, recognize that this is part of the pattern of getting you all upset. And we're just here to keep reminding you that all of these threats are meaningless. There's nothing that this person can do to you. They're making you feel like it, but intimidation is part of their technique. And by her recognizing that, but she needs to be reminded, even though it's years of this, she needs to keep being reminded, this is the truth, this is the truth. What that person is saying is not true because of the dynamic in that relationship. You know, that control still of being able to get in that person's head. Do you find that with a lot of your clients, that they still are dealing with someone in their head from years ago whose voice is more significant than their own?
Absolutely. And particularly my past clients who encounter new situations, they'll come back to me and say, as a matter of fact, I had somebody yesterday said to me, oh, the cats are running around again. I was like, oh, I thought you had 2 dogs. I didn't know you have a cat. She goes, no, the cat's in my head. They're running around. They're keeping me up at night. And I was like, oh, okay. All right, well, let's just have a standalone session and we'll put those cats to sleep, and then you'll be able to sleep again. And I could see her face just drop.
Yeah.
Like, the whole physiological reaction was one of instant peace of mind. And that's really what we want. And I help people, remind people, okay, this is just like those things that happened when we were working on this together. And so what I want you to do, and sometimes I'll create a little image, is take this piece of information you've just gotten today that feels like it's triggering you, and I want you to put it in an envelope. You might literally need to put a piece of paper in an envelope or a sticky note as a symbol, or maybe you've received a piece of paper and you want to put it in an envelope. And then I want you to seal that envelope, write on it what it is and date it, do everything you need to do, and then I want you to put it in your document pile. And that puts borders around it, and it helps dampen the trigger so that the person can begin to restore their thinking again.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because it's like, it's almost like with a label. Like when you have a thing, it's not just floating around in your head. It's like, I don't know what this is. It's just this uncomfortable terror that I have. But putting it onto a piece of paper and sealing it up, that it's like a thing, and now I can see it, and it's over here. And I know you had said that part of your job is to notch down, to experience something as a memory instead of as a live event. So can you, like, the body is a living organism, you had said. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. And what the example that I just gave you was a good example, is a good example of how you separate yourself, take a step back from the live event, step out of the event and begin to use your ability, or if not, will create that ability to observe yourself taking action rather than, oh my God, I've got to take the action. Sometimes in the moment, you have to just take the action. You can't really think about it very much. But as soon as you get to the other side is when you can take that breath and go, oh, and you can replay it in your mind. Here's what I did. And I will often do this with clients, and we'll look back into the past and they'll see themselves taking certain actions. And that will bring up thoughts. We'll then address those thoughts and the feelings that are attached to those thoughts. And then we'll work on those because those are usually attached to events prior to the traumatic event itself. And that's the trigger. And that's the nature of hypnotherapy, to access the archives of the subconscious that the conscious mind just doesn't understand. Why am I being so triggered by this? The court case in and of itself alone is enough to serve as the traumatic event. But in most cases, there has been previous trauma that's adding to the pile. It's just out of sight, out of mind. And you're wondering, why is this bonfire so big? So my job is to help take the fuel away from the bonfire so that it becomes maybe a lit match in the dark. And you go, oh, I see the handwriting now that I've lit the match. Okay, what do I want to do about that? So it becomes a self-management tool so that you can restore equilibrium and consistency in your day-to-day life. And that is really important. The brain, all of us, is always looking for safety and security, always. And so that's what habits are all about. Habits are shortcuts, like keystroke shortcuts. Oh, let me just push this button and I can go live, as opposed to, I don't know, the 3 or 4 steps that you gave me to get there to go live. I was like, okay, I don't see any of those steps. I'll just, okay, there's something that says live. I'm going to push that. And suddenly I went, okay. And so that's a really great example of how we all want to live our lives, which is very efficiently, but there's a sense of safety and security and ongoingness to that that allows the brain to relax and stop producing epinephrine or adrenaline, which is interfering with our thought process and keeping us up at night.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking one of the things that you had mentioned in our last conversation was how the brain is flooded with stimuli. And so it takes time to sort of sort all of that out. And so that's what you do.
That's exactly correct. And in hypnosis, I can help people create tremendous distance by rewiring initial events. And that way they don't have to struggle or use a lot of willpower or become exhausted trying to keep certain things compartmentalized or at bay. They just exist as they are, and there is a non-reaction to it. And that's how you know you have resolved it.
That is huge. I mean, that's huge to have that to not have a reaction. I was going to say have a non-reaction, but to not react, because so much of what happens is that we have these knee-jerk responses. We're terrified, we want to answer. The other person baits us, we want to say something right away. Chris always teases me and say, I like to click ahead, like something happens. I'm like, I got to respond right now, good or bad. It's like, I just want to do it. And so what you're describing is important for everyone, not just dealing with a family court case, but just to pause, right?
That's exactly right. Some people are hardwired to be able to pause and be more objective. And, you know, my sister's one of those people. She'll in the middle of something and she'll go, all right, well, let me think this through. And I'm like, oh my God, do you have that ability to think it through? Oh my God. And I have a knee-jerk reaction that says, okay, I got to fix it. I have to take action now, and then I'll strategize afterwards. And sometimes that's an okay thing. If I had to run in the middle of the street and scoop up a child or an animal that was in the middle of a busy street, yeah, I want to take action now. But if a situation comes up and I need to look at it from different angles in the middle of my reactionary behavior, I cannot do that. So I have to create habits that cull distance for me and allow me to at least take a half a step to the side so I can breathe. Once I can breathe, I can begin to think again. And that's the process that I work with people.
Okay, and you had said that it can take like a few sessions, but it's not, I mean, usually you think of therapy as it's going to take years. It takes years to rewire the brain, but you're saying that doesn't necessarily have to be that way.
No, with hypnosis, when we rewire the brain, it's immediate. Now, it's not going to solve everything immediately, but it will have a positive domino effect on perhaps the thing that you're attending to, but maybe a lot of other things that you weren't expecting will have positive benefit or outcome from rewiring. And so it is a process. The way that I work hypnotherapy is called root cause, meaning we get to the bottom of it. I would say 95% of hypnotherapists out there just simply say, well, let's set up a session and see how it goes. That's too casual for me. That's too scattershot for me. I know the tasks that need to occur in order for you to get the outcome that you're looking for, and that's going to be a minimum of 5 sessions, whether we do them back to back or whether we do them once a week. That's going to be your choice, but they have to be done in order to get those results, because it is a very layered process.
Yeah, and something you had said that it stood out to me was there is no resolution, there's only adaptation.
Resolution for many of us means I don't want to have to think about that anymore. Adaptation is, oh, that scene just came back up into my head. But the adaptation part is maybe I don't have to respond to it, or maybe I don't have to have a reaction to it. In other words, an event that occurred that caused a scar, that scar will lighten over time, but the scar may not go away, whether it's internal or external. And you can't just go poof, make the scar go away, unless you may have some surgery, in which case that might create more scarring. So you look at something and go, oh yeah, I remember when I got that scar, but you're not freaking out about it. So that's the adaptation piece.
Yeah. What are some myths that people have about hypnosis that you think you maybe would like to dispel? Because I think some people think of it as like, oh, you can make me do anything and you have all this power over me, and I'm scared of it.
I know. I had that too before I came to the scene. I was like, oh, I'm not so sure that I want somebody messing with my mind. Mm-hmm. But truly, it is a state of mind. It's not a state of relaxation. We use relaxation because it just feels so good. But it is a partnership, meaning you're not asleep. You will recall everything, just like any interesting conversation. So if somebody's watching this, they're going to really come away with the particulars that are important to them. And it's the same thing of hypnosis. The client's always in charge. If I said something that they didn't like, they might go, yeah, I don't know about that. And they have plenty of times. And I'll go, okay, well, let's try this. I want to customize it to suit them. What I won't do are change the facts. I can't change history, no matter how much you want me to. We can future cast some potential outcomes, and you'll feel good because now you're in charge and now you feel powerful, and we can work off of that. And that may actually come to pass, but we're not going to change anything that occurred in the past. So one of the myths is, hey, you're always in charge. You're not going to go to sleep. You'll be awake the entire time. And if you think you're going to doze off, believe me, the sound of my voice, as loud as it can get, is going to wake you right up anyway. So that's not a problem. You're going to be able to follow instructions. I'm not going to make you do anything other than facilitate the process that allows you to achieve your goals, whatever it is that we agree upon to begin with.
That's excellent. I'm thinking in the past, I actually did hypnotherapy, not for trauma, but before I had my first child, I really wanted to have a natural childbirth. And I had heard about it, and I thought, let's see. And I remember thinking, what's she going to do? And I sat on a couch, and I did go into like a very relaxed state, and she did have me do a lot of ways to envision what it would feel like, and like the pain. I would feel pain, but that I could control it, and I had to imagine it almost like a soundboard and turning the volume down. And when the birth actually happened, it was really painful and awful, and I tried to use what I had learned, and it felt like, it's still like really painful. Whatever it was, I was able to achieve that goal, and I did have the natural childbirth. And so I don't know how much impact it had on me, but it did have a lot of other positive effects as well. And it could have been the reason why I had the natural childbirth, but I used to listen to the tape because she had me make cassette tapes at the time. But every time I needed to relax, I would still play those tapes because it was so helpful. So I wanted to know also, when you alluded to some of the other positive benefits, what are some other benefits that you see or that people have reported back to you after doing hypnotherapy in general? Let's not say just for a traumatic family court case, but how do they change?
In many different ways. I have clients I had a client who came to me because she wanted to resolve something with her sister. She had a twin sister, and so it had been an ongoing issue for many years. It was just sort of gnawing away at her. And she said, oh, yeah, and it just kind of wakes me up at night, but that's no big deal. My husband tells me to go back to sleep. And I'm like, oh, okay. Anyway, that turned out that it was a much bigger deal, the awakening at night, than she alluded to me. So we worked on the stuff with her sister. And the second session, she returned and said, you know, I'm sleeping through the night. My husband thinks you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. Keep going. And it had nothing to do with what we were going to be working on with her sister.
That's amazing. Like night sleep, that is huge. Huge.
It is. It is. For most people who are struggling with issues, sleep is often interrupted. So even though they're not going to come to me to work on that, they're going to work on something else, sleep is almost always improved. And if it's not, then we can, depending upon the amount of time we have, we can detour and deal with the origin of the anxiety or stress that's causing the interruption for sleep. And in almost 10 out of 10 cases, since I've worked on that a lot with people, it has nothing to do with what they think is keeping them awake. Well, let's see, I got to make sure to pay all the bills, and I have this thing coming up for my kid's school, and I got to do that. They think that's what's waking them up. Turns out it was something completely different that they had suppressed and forgotten about naturally, but it was surfacing during that time of less defensiveness, shall we say. And when we searched for the origin of that problem, that thing that they had forgotten about came up, and we got to resolve and rewire that so it doesn't interfere with their sleep anymore. The case of the woman with the cats in her brain, with the cats that had come back, I haven't met with her yet. We're going to schedule another session, so it'll be interesting to see the origin of what's keeping her awake, because we resolved all her other issues. So that tells me that there's something else that we didn't have time to attend to, but now is surfacing since everything else has been cleared. The things that have been waiting in the wings now get to come forward.
Fascinating. I mean, just the better sleeping alone sounds totally worth it. So Annie, can you tell people how to find, and I know you do a lot more than this, and we won't get into that now just for the sake of time, but can you tell people how to find you?
Sure, it's very easy. Northwest Hypnosis Center. Email's there, phone is there. I mean, if somebody's interested in writing down a phone number and wants to call me, they can. I have a consultation link on my page for free 30-minute consultations. People can self-schedule through Calendly. But if you just go to Northwest Hypnosis Center, you'll find everything you need.
Okay, and did you want to give the phone number if anyone wants to write it down?
Okay. For those of you who are Virgo-like, let me give you a phone number. The area code is 360, that's 360-840-1075. And you can call the text.
All right. Mm-hmm. And Annie, you can work with people via Zoom all over the place, right? You're in Washington State.
Yeah, I used to have an office, and people came into the office, and that was kind of cool and cozy and warm and fuzzy, and then COVID hit, and I was like, no, sorry, can't renew. So I would say the majority of hypnotherapists switched over to virtual practices, and I was doing that pre-COVID, but then I became a dedicated virtual provider. And so, yeah, I have a global clientele. All I have to do is be able to tune my ear to all the global accents that I now have to deal with.
Yeah. All right. Well, Annie, thank you so much for coming on, and we will be in touch, and I'm sure we'll do a follow-up at some point as well.
Awesome. Thank you for having me as your guest. I really appreciate it, and really thanks for the tech help. You were great.
You're welcome. Okay, talk soon.
All right. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.